I get to create. First thing I do is we're in Dallas now. I use the scholarship money to pay for the event. I didn't have to pay for the hotel or the actual ticket to attend. It was all covered with my scholarship money, which is amazing. What a blessing. And then I ended up getting to the event, and one of my friends, Eli, happens to be there. And Eli, he moves to Florida, so I haven't heard from him in a while. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself one teeny tiny little favor and make sure to give us a follow, because I don't want you to miss out on any of the amazing episodes I got coming out this year. Without further ado, let's get right into this one. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about Create Conference. Now, the Create Conference is hosted by this guy I know named Ken Jocelyn. And so let me tell you how I met Ken. So rewind to back in, now this is December-ish or November-ish of 2022. And my boy Guillory, he hosted an event, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Guillory hosted an event, and at the event, at that time, he was doing some work with Ken Jocelyn, and at the time, he had Ken speak. He spoke virtually though, and he seemed like a pretty cool dude. And then that's how I started following him. I didn't really keep up with his stuff, but I just followed him, whatever. I think he spoke pretty well. He was in a car, I remember, with his kids. And then from there, Brandon hosted a conference called A to B Con. I didn't even mention A to B Con. I guess I don't know if it counts or not. I'll talk. I'll make the next episode A to B Con, because I went to A to B Con last year around May, and it was local, so I didn't really count it as me like traveling for a conference. So, but I'm gonna make my next episode. We're gonna do a little bit of audible, because I went to A to B Con. That technically is a conference. So, and it's actually around about the same size as Create. Create was like somewhere between like 250 and 300 people. So if we're counting Create, I definitely got to count A to B Con. Especially because I'm speaking at the upcoming A to B Con. By the time this episode airs, A to B Con 3 will have already passed. But without further ado, anyways, I'm gonna talk about A to B Con in the next episode. We're gonna do it audible. But yeah, so at A to B Con 2, which I went to, at A to B Con 2, I pretty much, Ken was one of the speakers. And so I got to see him speak on stage, and I got to actually go on stage and ask him a question. And so he was a really good speaker. And the way he broke his stuff there, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So what ended up happening is after the conference, I reached out to him on Instagram, was like, hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast. And so I ended up interviewing him. I think it was like maybe like a 30-minute interview, maybe 30-minute interview. And I remember because he wanted to talk about Create, and I ended up getting a ticket to Create after I had him on my podcast, launched his podcast right before I went to Create. And then from there, I attended, and I didn't really know what to expect. I know Brandon and my other guy I know named Dylan, they went to a Create prior to the one I went to, and they went to they got the most executive level ticket, the highest ticket you could purchase. And they said that they really enjoyed the event and they got to meet some cool people. So I went, and I had some pretty good intentions, or pretty good expectations, I guess you could say. And I didn't go with anyone. It was me pretty much going by myself. I forgot to mention, a lot of these conferences, I travel alone for the most part. But we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, so I get to Create. First thing I do is we're in Dallas now. I use the scholarship money to pay for the event. So again, traveled for pretty much close to, I'm not gonna say close to nothing because food adds up or whatever. But like I didn't have to pay for the hotel or the flights or the actual ticket to attend. It was all covered with my scholarship money, which is amazing. What a blessing. And so from there, I got, first thing I do, I get some Texas barbecue. Man, that Texas barbecue goes down. And then I ended up getting to the event, and one of my friends, Eli, happens to be there. And Eli, he moves to Florida, so I haven't heard from him in a while. So I get to Florida. I mean, I get to the event. I see Eli and this other friend of mine named Maria, who I met at A to B Con, was also at the event. And then there's one guy that ended up meeting. His name is David Reads Fast, or his IG name is David Reads Fast. He's a speed reading coach, and I was hanging out with them a whole bunch. I met a couple of other really cool people, and then they ended up selling ticket spots for their mastermind. And then I ended up buying the mastermind. That's the first time I ever purchased something from a conference. Like, I usually never purchase anything, but I was like, oh, this is cool. This is cool. And honestly, I haven't, full transparency, like I have not used the mastermind at all. I'm not gonna end up renewing. I had to stay for a year, but once that's done, I'm not joining back because just the times didn't work for me, and I wasn't able to even really make use of it like I would have loved to. So that sucks. So I pretty much wasted a lot of like $3,000 pretty much. But nevertheless, the conference itself was a dope conference, and the venue was really nice. It was at a church, and I got to have a lot of conversations. That was probably out of all the conferences I've been to, like that was the most conversations about God that I had ever. And I love how like faith based, like that's one of the core like pillars of what they do with the Create conferences. They make sure there's faith. And one lady, she was singing a gospel song, had a beautiful, beautiful voice. Like she could sing, like very, very well. It was almost like angelic, I guess you could say. And then we would pray at different points in time, like as a group for the conference at the conference, and it was just really good people. I didn't really follow up with many people afterwards from that I met from that conference. I collabed with a couple people. Shout out to Jill and her husband. I hopped on their podcast, and there's a couple other people I connected really well with. One guy, I remember his face, but his name is blanking right now. And then honestly, I hung out with Elijah and Eli and Maria and David the whole time when I was there at the event. And so when I'm the guy who when I go to these events, I'm just trying to network with people that I align with, and if I find new people, great. But there's just people that I already align with. It's like, how can we further these connections? Because like as a business owner, you don't really ever catch up with people. It's hard to find time to catch up with people, especially because we're all running our businesses and we all have our own lives. And these people, Eli lives in Florida, Maria lives in Dallas, so this was like actually like in her backyard. And I don't even know where David lives, to be honest. But it's like I met him at that event, and but it was one of those things where it's like you know I just rather continue deepening the relationships I do have with people I already know that I'm cool with. And then if I meet some new people, of course, by all means. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for the Create conference. It was a really good conference. As I said, something that I would definitely go back to. Wouldn't be in a rush to go back to it, but it was definitely I had a great experience and met some really nice people. As I said, there's not many often that you can have business conversations and talk about Jesus and and faith. It's hard to find. Like there's a lot of successful people who don't believe in God, and to each their own. But it's like for me, that as I said, I want to do business. I want to align. Like I want to live life with people I align with, essentially. And that's not to say that I don't want to talk to anyone that's not of the same denomination or the same belief as I am. But it's just like it's dope having those people, right? And that was pretty much it for the conference. I said this is gonna be a short one. The next episode, I'm gonna talk about A to B con. Um, and then after that, I'm gonna talk about what I was supposed to talk about, which is podcast movement. So so what I'm gonna do is actually I'm gonna talk about A to B con in the next episode, and the episode after that, I'm gonna talk about two conferences: podcast movement and summit of greatness. I'm gonna bring two in one because podcast movement is going to be a quick episode. That would probably be like a 2 minute episode. So I'm probably going to do that and the Summit of Greatness episode in one. So that's all for this episode. Sorry for rambling. We'll get right into the next one, which is where I'm going to be covering A to BCon, which is a local conference in Stamford, Connecticut, the city I was born and raised in. So stay tuned for that one. That's going to be a good one.